Tolerance. The dictionary defines tolerance as the act or capacity of enduring. Tolerance means acceptance. We can accept other people's religion, opinion, and choices, but history has shown us otherwise. A teacher by the name of Lisa Liss in the Twin Rivers School District did just that. Mrs. Liss taught a valuable lesson to her students in the community. The Holocaust was a time when tolerance was needed, and she is someone who would have been excellent for that time. Mrs. Liss thought it was important to know this. She talked to her class about going to the Museum of Tolerance, and they started collecting money. It took a while. They sold pizza, ice cream, chips, soda, candy, and even auctioned off a Nintendo once. This was so important to Miss Liss and the class that they did those things and so much more. Eventually, they had enough to go there, on a plane. Every child pitched in for the trip. On top of all of their hard work, they raised 1.5 million bandages to represent all the kids that died during the Holocaust. How did all of this come into being, though?
So why exactly did we start the Bandage Project? Let me go back in time a little bit. About 15, 16 years ago, one of my students came in to me, and he gave me a big hug and everything and told me he was so excited to see me. And we started talking, and I said, "Hey, how are you and your friend? You know, the one who used to hang out together all the time." And he kept looking down at the floor and, like this and saying, "What do you mean?" And finally I said, "All right." I said, "Come on, Robert." I said, "Something's up." And he said, "We're not friends anymore." And I said, "What do you mean you're not friends anymore?" I said, "Y'all were best friends." And he said, "Well, gangs can't be multicultural." And so that was like, what? So two things. It told me that he was in a gang and that he was now racist. And about that time, two of my kids ran in, Simon and Cameron, and they were best friends. Simon was a little black boy from Kenya, and Cameron was a little white boy from Utah. And they were the best of friends, and they were hugging and holding hands, and it was a fourth grade class, very innocent, very sweet. And I looked at them, and I looked at Robert, and I thought, like we teachers do, I self-imposed myself and decided that it must be my fault that they weren't friends anymore. So I sat my kids down and talked to them, and I said, "What's going on?" I said, "We got to figure something out." I said, "Because I just can't have this happening." Together, we decided that we probably needed to learn more about tolerance. Thus, the Tolerance Kids started. And as the Tolerance Kids started, they wanted to take on project after project, and they wanted to learn more and learn more.
From 1942 to 1944, Anne Frank, along with her family and 4 other Jews, all lived in a small attic apartment. They wouldn't have had to hide for 2 years if the Germans hadn't invaded, though. They all could not go outside or even make a sound. To have to live under such restrictions for 2 years is something we are only getting a small taste of. Anne has inspired many during these hard times and will keep inspiring people in the future.
So after seeing Cameron and Simon and seeing Robert again, I knew that I had to change something. So I took it back to my class, and I was very, very lucky because that class was so interested in everything. They just wanted to learn more and more and more. And finally it got to the point where they said, "We need to go to the Museum of Tolerance." And, and I told them, I said, "That's great." I said, "Well, let's go to the Museum of Tolerance." I said, "You do understand it costs a lot of money to go there." And they said, "Sure, we'll just raise the money." And I said, "We're talking about thousands." I said, "We got to get there. We got to have a hotel. We have to pay entrance fees, all that kind of stuff." And they said, "No problem. Those Freedom Rider kids did it. We can do it." So taking their attitude, I told them if they didn't mind working really hard, that I'd go ahead and take it to the principal. Luckily, I had Axel Hanneman as my principal when we first started there. So in 2006, we went on our first tolerance trip. And while we were at the Tolerance Museum, then the kids started thinking again, "Wow, I just can't imagine the millions of people who were killed. Tell us more." So I told them more and everything. We talked about it, and they said, "Is there anything that we could collect that would represent that? Because I don't even understand that. There were over 6 million Jewish people who were killed. What is that number?" So I talked to him and I said, "Well, I don't really know. I've never seen a million of anything." And so we talked some more, and they said, "Let's come up with something to collect." And they were adamant about it, and they really wanted it and everything. So we talked about it the rest of the year. And then the next year, that class was even more interested in it. They wanted to know more. They wanted to know what 1,000,000 was. They wanted to know what 6,000,000 was, what 11,000,000 was. And we started talking about it more. And then they told me, they said, Miss Liss, come on, we gave you a whole bunch of stuff. Just choose something. What are we going to collect? So I told them, I said, all right, let's brainstorm as much as we can and we'll come up with something. So I took their list home of the brainstorming, and they had marbles and toothpicks and pennies and flowers and God only knows, a lot of things on that list. And so I sat at home and I was staring at it. And I told them, my daughter, and I said, listen, I promised the kids I'd come up with what we're going to collect tonight. And I said, none of this stuff is making any sense. And about that time, she hurt her finger. And so she said, Mom, where's the bandages? And I said, oh, they're in the, oh my God, bandages. And she said, oh, yes. And I said, what do bandages do? They come in all shapes, sizes, and colors. And what's their use? They heal pain. So I thought, that's it. We've got to collect bandages. And so I took it back to my students the next day, and they yelled and screamed and were so excited. And they said, yes, that's going to happen. We're going to get that. In 1 year, we're going to get 6 million bandages. And this was probably March, I guess, and February 2008. And so we said, by the end of the year, we'll have our 6 million. And bandages started trickling in. Somebody'd send us 1 or 20, or finally, somebody sent us 100 or 1,000. And by the end of the year, we did have 100,000 bandages, but nowhere near 6 million. That was kind of frustrating and rewarding, because I know people were at least doing something, and they were learning about it, and they were hearing about it.
Mrs. Liss's Bandage Project didn't just inspire her students, but many students today.
My favorite thing about the Anne Frank exhibit was the band-aids. I liked how every state donated thousands of band-aids to show their sympathy for 1.5 million kids that died, including Anne Frank.
What would you do if you were in Anne Frank's shoes?
If I was in Anne Frank's shoes, I would be more careful. I would not have looked out that window, because that was what led for them to drown.
Okay, so I moved up with my 4th grade class that year and took them to 5th grade. And that was a lot of fun. That was so much fun. We were able to do so much. And unfortunately, we had a different principal for the 5th grade year, but for the 4th grade year, it was great. And that class, we had written a play the year before, and we wrote some grants and did some other projects. So we were really gung-ho and ready to hit this bandage project with both feet. And when we did some of the grants and we had a tolerance fair, and we raised enough money to go to the Museum of Tolerance that year and do all that kind of stuff, which was great. And that year, we averaged about 100,000 bandages again. And so I was like, oh, we're never going to get this. And the following year, for their 5th grade year, we averaged another 100,000 bandages. And then at the end of that year, I was moving schools, and this young man named Michael, one of my kids who was really slow about writing letters, it took him all year to write one bandage letter. He finally got it written, and that letter went to a synagogue in Los Angeles. Toward the end of the year, the synagogue asked us if we would come and receive an award from B'nai Naphtali and from the city of Los Angeles for an accommodation. So I was really excited about that. So my husband and I went down there and picked up the bandages, filled up my whole entire car, and that was 100,800 bandages. So when I moved to Woodlake, I had those to start with to get them excited about it. At that point, we had counted probably maybe 300,000 bandages, and then the 100,000 that they were writing on. And this class was pretty rough, a lot rougher than Strow. And as teachers know, when you're a new teacher, you end up getting the most challenging kids there are. So I thought, well, I got to do something with them. So I decided to really push the bandage project. And we talked about it and sat around and everything. And I told them, I said, look, we're never going to get 6 million bandages. I said, what's more important that y'all learn about this? And one of the kids said, well, about the children. How many children were killed? And I said, you're right. It's more about the children. So we talked about that and knew that 1.5 million children that they know of were murdered during the Holocaust. So we decided to take that number and run with it. So we made that our goal. And that was in 2012.
Mrs. Liss inspired and helped create an exhibit about Anne Frank where students could learn about the Holocaust.
Probably all the information that the articles gave and all the detail in the pictures and artwork.
How would you feel if you were in Anne Frank's shoes?
I would be terrified, and I would definitely be as quiet as I could, and I would probably not be able to sleep at night. What would you do in Anne Frank's shoes?
I would be terrified, and I would probably be as quiet as I could, but it probably wouldn't work out.
Some people express how they feel about history by teaching it.
And then how did Anne's friend die?
Publicly shot. Hi, my name is Christopher. I am a docent for the Anne Frank Museum in the 6th grade.
What do you like being about a docent?
You get to tour people around it, and you get to help people learn about this kind of stuff because it's important.
What do you think is the most important part of the Anne Frank Museum?
It's important to understand how bad Hitler's reign was.
Hi, my name is Muriel. I'm a docent for the Anne Frank Museum.
What do you like being a docent?
I like telling people about the past and telling people more about what has happened, and I think it's pretty cool.
The impression that Anne Frank and Mrs. Liss have made has inspired students to express themselves through many forms.
All right, inside my room there are some really cool things. In 2008, my students made this quilt, and it depicts all the different types of people who were persecuted against. This was one of the first murals that we created. All of my students wrote a quote from Anne Frank, and then they drew a picture. We have some other murals that we created. These are handprints, thumbprints from all the kids in the school. 8 Hertz Tolerance Hills. And come around this way. This is our gorgeous tolerance garden. This is a pathway that the kids wrote Anne Frank quotes on. If I have any talent for writing, books, or newspapers, well, then I can always write for myself. Anne Frank. No one has ever become poor by giving. And then This is our gorgeous mural. These are the benches where we wrote quotes, and every year we pull out the wood and kids rewrite quotes, we stain it, complete it.
Anne Frank and many others represent a time in history where they were helpless against the Nazis. But these strong people show that it is possible to endure even the darkest times. Mrs. Liss and her students also show that. Give kids a chance to shine. Believe in them and they will show you the world. Once a tolerance kid, always a tolerance kid.